the tech companies, they could actually just like use some of the creations for training, but then there's also a sort of like revenue stream where it actually gets to the creators. That for me is what is my perspective about AI in this age.
Thank you so much, Kenneth, for walking us through, I'd say, your thoughts around AI in the creative industry, especially as a creative yourself. Thank you so much for really, I'd say, shedding a little bit of hope and excitement towards this new, I would say, opportunity that is presenting itself. Looking at it in a very optimistic way of, oh, it can really also do this, although it's, causing these changes here and there in a way we're not so prepared for, which you also went on to really highlight how training is essential, which is exactly where now we're going to, I would say, go into our next segment of this conversation, really get to explore authorship and originality and protection of African identity in a, like, I would say, a machine mediated creativity, as Kenneth had just said and all our panelists touched on. So again, to question to you, Kenneth, how do you think these AI tools can reinforce rather than erase? You mentioned something about training. What kind of trainings do you think are very much essential? Is it even actually possible to have some sort of trainings that are benefiting, strictly, African creatives on a global perspective, if I would say? So what would you suggest would be the best way to go about this issue in making sure that African creativity is at the center and taking into account our creatives as well? Kenneth,
Oh, sorry, you
can
have
you
to
hear
repeat
us?
it again, because it went off. Could you repeat the question again, please?
No problem, no problem. I was just really reflecting on your I would say something you shared about the enthusiasm about
Mm-hmm.
AI being more of an opportunity and really the hope around that. And you mentioned something about all we need is basically some training to find a way to train and show our creatives how to best leverage this. So I wanted to know how exactly can that be done, and how then can it be done in a way that positions, of course, these creatives at the center, especially on the global market.
Yeah, I think like the first thing is that there has to be strengthened policies, and that has to be at government level. Because I remember that I've attended some conferences where there's been conversations around what governments are doing to protect creatives. I'm really happy that the minister said about the event that happened in Rwanda. So I really think that from a Nigerian perspective, I think that the policies have to actually be in place that will actually strengthen some of the societies that that also will have it's sort of like a library where those data sets will actually be there, and then the tech companies will get them from there, and basically have like a sort of revenue stream for filmmakers. But I would say that most of this will have to do with policies, and because in Africa we really have, we have policies in place, but they're really not enforced. So we need, enforced policies from like government, and then also try to just get the tech company to sit on the table and have conversations with our representative societies.
Thank you, Kenneth. Truly, reinforcement. I love the emphasis around the reinforcements. We already have these and that in place, but we need to basically reinforce it. And you are right. We're very fortunate to have with us here today, Minister Sandrine. And you mentioned something about it has to start from the government. Basically, it has to be a top to bottom sort of channeling of these policies. So that led me to think, what regulatory or policy gaps must African nations urgently address to protect creators in an AI-driven context? From coming from a person who is actively involved in, I would say, and a government institution that works in a way that best channels that, Minister Sandrine.
Thank you, Queen. And I just want to acknowledge the comment of Mr. Kenneth just a few minutes ago. There is definitely an issue of enforcement. I hope you can hear me well. There's definitely an issue of enforcement. If I take maybe the example of the IP laws in general, without even looking at the ones specifically looking at the at AI use, what we've been noticing with intellectual property across the board is that most countries do have those laws in place. Most countries have signed international convention for the protection of intellectual property. But then when you look at actual implementation at the ground level, it's almost as if no one had ever signed anything. So if I may again borrow from what Mr. Kenneth just mentioned a few minutes ago, we now have to ask ourselves, if the legal instruments are in place, what is really stopping us from enforcing? So it now comes down to having a stronger coordination among the different stakeholders. So we're talking about people in the hospitality business, we're talking about people in the media. Of course, you also have to look at the people who are in the legal system to make sure that our artists who are creative, whenever there is an infringement on the economic rights, as Samuel Sangwa has explained to us on numerous occasions, that they know where to report this. The same way that if someone is stealing something from you, because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. If someone is stealing something from you, you can actually go to the police and report it as a crime being having taken place. So back to the question of IP, I think if it's crucial for us at policy level, at implementation level as well, to use the example of the IP, seeing how it seems to be very slow to be implemented, to be enforced, and now look at how fast AI is moving and acknowledge that as long as we're not able to put in place the policies that specifically look at how AI assisted works need to be defined in terms of ownership, then couple of years from now, we'll be even further behind that we already are when it comes to the protection of IP, the general IPs. So again, to me, it's really a call that I want to make to the creatives that we have on the continent, the cultural entrepreneurs, but I would say in general, the ecosystem that support the creatives. So now I'm looking at the managers, I'm looking at the legal system that's behind them, the publicists, I mean, the whole chain of people who work around them. How can they support the creative to know how to protect their work, to understand which kind of policies have been passed? Yes, we can say, in other words, that when policies come out or when laws are being promulgated, it's not always done in a manner that the majority of the population know about it, but that means that there is an effort to be made on the level of the team that works with the artists to actually go out and read those laws and know exactly how it impacts the work of their talents. So that's on one element. So the other thing that I again want to really emphasize here is, if we again learn from what has been going on for the past few years in terms of implementation or enforcement of IP, I think there is an urgent need to accelerate the development of comprehensive digital rights frameworks to make sure that AI-generated content does not displace or misappropriate the work of African creatives. The other element, again, learning from the IP protection laws that being used all around the continent, or at least written in the laws of each country, is to make sure that we do have stronger cooperation across borders. As we like to say within our team, that AI does not recognize national boundaries. Yet when you look at how fast we need to move, sometimes our response can be quite fragmented. So again, this feels like we're trying to play catch up with how fast technology is moving. So there's definitely a call for all stakeholders. So again, from the policy level all the way to those who live off their creativity, to make sure that the policy acknowledge what AI is currently doing to our creativity. Again, AI being a powerful tool, but if again it's left unchecked or people take advantage of it and not report to the rightful owner where the original idea came from, then again we are facing something that is literally taking the economic rights away from the creative. And when you're taking the economic rights again away from the creative, you're actually taking something away from an entire community, as Samuel just mentioned a few minutes ago, and again encouraging people to also go and read those AI studies that have been conducted by CISAC. Something else that I would also like to mention in line with the regulatory or policy gaps that we have currently, I think there is also a need for funding systems to evolve. We currently do not have sufficient grant mechanisms that support AI experimentation in the arts, and we consequently must do so much more to bridge the divide between creative innovation and technological advancement. So I'll stop here and hand the floor back to you, Queen. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Minister Sandrine. If I may, you mentioned something about these policies have already been put in place. So is that to say that if maybe, let's say we would have worked on the policies or on the convention or on the side agreements that we had already had with this particular, I'd say, communities that have creatives and artists all together globally or even at a continental level, does that mean that we could have been able to face this, I would say, AI revolution? Or would we have need to again sit down and sort of draft other new mechanisms to deal with AI? Or is there no need for that, if I would say?
So what I was referring to is the protection of intellectual property law. So in the context of Rwanda, the newest law was actually passed. It wasn't updated. So the newest law passed last year in July of 2024. And that law actually looks at all the works that come from intellectual property. So of course we have the creative industries, but you also have other sectors. For example, pharmaceutical, you have sectors coming from the defense, in business, any sector, I would say, where something can be produced again from your creativity and then that deserves to be protected so that somebody else can use it later and pay you back again the money that came from your creativity, is actually outlined in that law that was passed in Rwanda in 2024. And this law actually is based on Rwanda being a signatory to international convention for the protection of intellectual property. Now, what we are noticing now, and here Samuel and Mr. Kenneth can provide more details as needed, what we are noticing is that the intellectual property laws are in place, but AI is moving so much faster than that our ability to adapt some of these policies. So what we are noticing now is that we do need to accelerate the digital rights frameworks. So if every country has what I would call data management policies or data sets policies, we need to make sure that these actually are a reflection of how fast artificial intelligence is currently being used to create new bodies of work in the creative industries. And if we can actually learn again from the mistakes that we've made when it comes to the enforcement of IP protection, is to say, here we have failed in the past because of A, B, C, and D in terms of enforcement. How do we make sure that we don't repeat the same mistakes now that we are looking at another level of creativity that now is using tools that are not human, quote unquote. Maybe to give you in a few words, the answer is we do have the IP laws, but they now need to incorporate the reality on the ground of how all these digital tools are affecting the way we create, and they're also affecting how we know where the original piece was coming from and how we need to pay again or acknowledge where the original idea was coming from before a machine came and transformed it and presented it in a different manner, if that makes sense. Over back to you, Queen.
Thank you so much, Minister Sandrine, for that, shedding more light on the matter. I truly believe also that there is need, of course, to revamp, especially in how I would say multi-faced AI actually is. You know, there are AI generated, I'd say, literatures and creative materials that deal with already existing, I would say, that sort of enhance or make better an already existing, I would say, creative art piece, and there are those that actually build it from scratch. And I think it's only fair that we close off, I'd say, this particular section with Mr. Samuel Sangwa in regards to especially those kind of, I would say, AI materials that are generated from already existing art pieces or artworks. And maybe he could, for him to tell us about I would say, the whole chain if possible, or even what is being done to sort of make sure that chain is not there, cases where we sort of see literature or even I would say music that is basically often trained on existing material. That basically there is AI that is being trained on already existing material in terms of musical literature, and how do we see that affecting authorship and also fair remuneration to these specific art pieces, if I would say. So over to you, Mr. Sangwa.
Thank you, Queen. And I really want to take advantage of the presence of Kenneth Young, a person to whom I have a big respect because he's been the creative and has put Africa on the map, and he's in the audiovisual sector, the audiovisual industry. So it's making basically movie in Nigeria. We all know the Nollywood success story. So the whole discussion is also, it's a very economic discussion. Economic from the viewpoint of, we are talking about money. In IP, we have this word which say, show me the money and I'll follow it. So if we follow the money and we go to the production, AI appears as a way to reduce costs. And it makes perfectly sense for anybody when you are either producing a movie or you want some music, you want to be, let me say, sensitive to how you are going to get your production very adjustable. You know, to get resources to make a movie is not easy. So when AI comes and tell you, for instance, and this is what is happening for screenwriting, like you want to write a script, in the past, you will hire somebody who will write the script for you. But now with AI, you can just prompt. You can say, create me a script, a scenario for a movie, 1 hour with 10 characters, and this is the plot. And the AI will generate it. So this is one of the issue which we need to look at. AI is also able today to direct movies. So it's actually substituting itself to movie director. You just put cameras around a certain place, and then the camera will follow the prompt. Why am I saying this? Because now I'm coming back to your question, Queen, about authorship and copyright and remuneration. What is happening here is the AI is actually using existing material. And this is very, very important. It means it uses protected works. It uses works which belongs to creators, composer, screenwriter, lyricist, and the like. And these are protected by the copyright in our respective countries in Africa. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the AI services are going to access those existing material. They are going to compile them in a database to stock them or to archive them. They are going to process them and to generate new output, to generate type of art form. So all of this process of accessing, stocking, processing, and generating, from the viewpoint of IP, this is infringement, as long as these services do not compensate or do not recognize the initial creators. And I really want to make this quite clear. AI does not enhance from scratch, not at all. It's create from existing works. And here we have an issue now. At the end of the day, you are depriving the creators who authored the initial works of an economic revenue which will end up being captured by the AI services. So that's the issue now with copyright. And to put it now in a simple example, I'm going back to my initial example in music. Let's now imagine music created by AI played on a radio. So basically the radio will claim that there's no creators behind those music, so there's no payment of copyright. This will undermine definitely the whole spirit of intellectual property, knowing that those works, the output from the AI, actually build on pre-existing works. So the whole discussion here, and I really want to echo Honorable Minister Sandrine in this is, how do we make sure through the copyright legislation, how do we make sure we bring the AI services to comply? Because at the end of the day, even in the current state of our respective legislation, if you access my material, you need to get my authorization. If you reproduce or you process, you need to get my authorization. So our legislation are there. We just need to engage. And I want to be very bold and propose something, because I think from what has happened in Kigali, the Kigali AI Declaration and the fund, we can really propose something, all of us. I believe we need to have what we'll be calling a position paper. A position paper will be how the creative sector, the policy sector in Africa want to make sure AI is not detrimental to the creativity. So that would become a position paper. And this probably through the fund which Honorable State Minister Sandrine said are available, this is something we can fund by ourselves. A position paper will lead us to what we may call elaboration of a model legislative framework. How should our legislative framework look like to bring these services to comply? Just to give you an example, while we are discussing, the EU, the European Union Commission, provided a Copyright Act, which actually is binding into the territory of the European Union, asking the AI services to comply and to be transparent. So we strongly believe in our continent, we can also get there. So if we have a position paper funded, we can from there elaborate kind of a legislative framework, what we call a model law. A model law is a reference piece of legislation which you can avail to countries to help them to adapt or to amend the legislation very quickly, either through decrees, either through the regulatory instrument. So I believe we need to get there. And for me, the ultimate discussion we need to have as African is to engage the AI services. It's not about our legislation only. It's about telling them you can't be a predatory services on Africa. This is not good for your reputation. This is not an ethical business model. So how do we engage? And I'm really happy that we have the Youth Connekt taking this subject. Probably in the next summit or any other event, it may be quite interesting to invite these AI services to have this dialogue to say, guys, how do we make sure you work in an ethical way? I also understand sometimes a policy takes times, but we can also work on a code of good practices and bring them to sign such code of good practices. So these are some of the pieces of practical, I would say, suggestion which we may take and deploy in the next couple of months or weeks if we really come together, the policymakers, the IP, interested parties, and the creative sector. Over to you, Queen.
Thank you so much, Mr. Samuel, for yet another, I would say, enriching way of really walking us through what's really going on in terms of AI and creative economy, in terms of the legal frameworks and protection laws. Personally, the movie director AI is a bit new to me. I don't know about our audience. I really did know that that was there. And I think you've really set the tone to us now. I would say going straight into our third segment, which is going to be, as you kept on saying, basically how do we structure these legal frameworks to meet these specific needs in their diverse, I would say, manner. So basically this segment now is basically to discuss the state of institutional readiness and policy innovation and regional action. I think there was also a bit all our panelists really shed light on that in terms of saying we already have these laws here and there. We need maybe a little bit of advancement here. We need a little bit of readiness here as well. So I think for this particular one, now we really got, I would say, to we sort of got a glimpse of how this all could be made better, or this could be solved in this particular way in a sort of a legal framework. But now I would say I want to hear from Mr. Kenneth as a creative in this industry, as the artist in question here, as the owner of the works that are being debated on and deliberated here and there in the discussion. What are the most crucial investments? Are they legal, financial, or institutional to protect and empower African creatives in an AI era? So where do we need to basically hit the nail on the head? What exactly do we need to do to make sure that we deal with this AI revolution in the best way possible?
Thank you, Queen. I would say that for me, some of the possible solutions would be to have culturally diverse data sets and training. I mean, I've talked about that before. And like, I mean, we need to have, like, I mean, a global effort to build and curate AI data sets that, are truly diverse, that are not really biased, about, us as Africans. So you need to have, like, I mean, content from African languages, in terms of whether it's like, I mean, music. So that for me is like the one solution. Another one is about, I mean, having like ethical AI development and also governance. And we also just, like, I mean, talked about that in terms of like developing frameworks and guidelines that, also addresses cultural appropriation. And of course, there has to also be conversations around fair compensation in terms of, like, I mean, how our creative works are used. And also there's another key thing too, which is transparency and attribution, which also is, like, I mean, it's sort of like, I mean, a legal framework where you ensure transparency, where if my works are being used, I mean, if any sort of my works are being used, there has to be a sort of, like, I mean, attribution to the fact that my works were actually trained with that. And then I think, like, the minister and also Samuel also reiterated this, which is stronger copyright and IP protection, which it is what we've been clamoring for. Like, we've said here that these policies and these laws are there, but it's all about making sure that they are really enforced. And basically, for me, I will also just, like, I mean, clamor on my sort of like level for filmmakers to always make sure that they join societies, because it is only when we are in societies that we can always just like speak with a common voice. And this is something that I've realized in my career. And whenever I have an opportunity like this, I always talk about this to young people, to make sure that they are part of all the societies. There are various societies, whether you're into music or film. And I think for us in Nigeria, it is there, but it is very slow for people to have an understanding of why it is important to be part of a society that speaks with united voice. But for me, generally, I would think that some of the possible solutions are what I mentioned, but then most especially, we need to just get young people to be part of societies, and also just like push the government, the policymakers, into ensuring that we are protected, and the sort of, like, I mean, our creative works are really rewarded and also protected. Thank you. Over to you, Queen.
Thank you, Kenneth. Indeed, there needs to be a protection, I would say, but also a reward, which I think is, I would say, art deserves that point, that space in the economy as well. We have tourism that, of course, has, I would say, what it brings and also what it sort of takes back. So we really, I think, need to also give that space to the creative sector as well, to be something that produces, that sort of brings something to the economy, but also is capable of taking something back to itself. And that's really how we develop it. That's how we continue to have it giving more and more into, I would say, the whole state of the economy in general. So now I think the whole, I would say the whole question now is not rather how, but now it's not how do we solve this, or how do we sort of bridge this gap between AI and the creative industry, and how it's used, but rather now how do we tailor all those solutions down to an African artist's perspective. Which is why I think you mentioned, Mrs. Sango actually even mentioned, you know, the possibility of having basically workshops or like assemblies of that could gather youth, such as the summit and everything, which is actually interesting because the creative economy or the orange economy is actually part of our 7 sub-themes. So I think we're even going to actually discuss that further and see how we can use such a space that is with youth, that has artists, and see now how we can get to vividly talk about these particular challenges and the possible solutions like in real time. So I think for that, I really now want to hear from Minister Sandrine in that terms of say regional partnerships or like maybe continental platforms like Youth Connect, the African Union, Connekt, or any other of the sort. How can we basically work with them, maybe beyond the workshop or even beyond mobilization as we see it, to ensure a unified Africa stance on AI and cultural sovereignty? How can we leverage these groups that have a lot of youth to go to sort of achieve all of these legal frameworks maybe we're proposing, or even investments that we are trying to propose in various creative sectors?
Thank you, Queen. It's definitely a loaded question right here because we noticed that we do have the legal framework, like the countries are signing, like I was mentioning at the beginning of our X space, that just a few months ago here in Rwanda, all 55 member states of the AU actually signed the Africa Declaration on Artificial Intelligence. So now we're wondering, again, why is the implementation lagging behind when we do see that at the highest level of the leadership, there is a strong push for a continent to move together and protect again the rights of all these different citizens. So I want to say maybe in terms of continental platforms, it then comes down to, if we take the example of Youth Connect Africa right now, is how do we together, again, in line with all the different member states that are part of the Youth Connect Africa Hub, how do we mainstream AI within all the different pillars that we consider as the main pillars for this program to be implemented across the continent? How do we make sure that when we talk about whether we're talking about the green economy, the blue economy, or orange economy, that we always have this component, how does AI affect the way people work and how do people actually make money from the work that they put out? I also want to touch on Connekt, so the Creative Africa Nexus under the AfriXM Bank, which is one of the biggest banks at the continental level that support the creative and cultural industries. There currently is a platform to fund and showcase AI-integrated art, film, fashion, etc., the categories of art, with a very specific focus on African originality and ownership. And again, because we do have this, I want to say, this family, for lack of a better word, of the AU that's taking the charge or leading the movement when it comes to the protection again of the economic right, or should be protecting the economic rights of people who work on the continent. So we need, again, whenever we have this type of conversation at the highest level of policy making, is to make sure that the component of AI is not just addressed in a very superficial manner, but actually we delve into the details. Again, if we're learning from the examples that Mr. Kenneth and Samuel just presented to us a few minutes ago, how do we make sure that something that can cut production costs does not, turn into something that cannibalize, to quote Samuel, our industry and leave so many people behind. So I want to say that at the continental level, we do have a number of institutions, from AFCFTA, of course, the AU, all these frameworks that have been signed by the presidents of our nations, that are supported by the partners, whether they are from the continent or outside of the continent, to make sure that whatever we sign is actually put into practice. But I want to say that at the end of the day, again, things are enforced because, and again, to quote Mr. Kenneth, because people move together. So if I am a creative, I'm part of an institution that defends my rights. So almost like having a syndicat or a society, as Mr. Kenneth was just mentioning, if more of a creative were actually being part of these institutions that represent the interest and defend the interest, and they can put all the legal instrument behind them and have the best legal teams to support their work, I think enforcement will become a little bit easier. I'm not saying that would be the only answer, but it will definitely become a little bit easier, because again, when you are facing an infringement on your economic right, if you are the only creative who is going to, to the institution in charge of IP protection, your voice alone does not stand as much. But if you move again as a group, then you're actually putting a little bit more pressure on the people who are, pretending like the laws don't exist, or making excuses for not abiding by them. So again, in a few words, what I want to say is, for us to be able to maximize on all these instruments that have been signed and endorsed at private sector level, government level, civil society level, is to make sure that the people who do live again from these economic rights can organize themselves and make sure that their interests become stronger when they are working better together. I hope that answers your question. And maybe to touch on the element of the languages, because again, although we are having this conversation here in a non-African language, I want to say that it's also important that we continue to train our AI tools in our native languages, or our mother tongue, so that again we are making it easier for the future generation to understand that we can create in our native languages, that the tools that we will be using to perfect how we communicate with others will also be, trained in the languages that we use, so that we don't also fall into the other trap of saying, okay, if we have to use this kind of technology, then we must use it in a Western language. Over back to you, Quinn. Quinn, are we together? I can't hear anything right now.
Yeah, it seems she's speaking,
Yes,
but she's
we
not
are.
able to talk.
We are. It was a little issue with my mute button. It got a little bit stuck. But thank you, Minister Sandrine, for a really, I would say, that word of encouragement, of that originality and sort of the diversity that African continent has, which is exactly why we've been gathered here, to really see how we can protect that and sort of make it even better in terms of protecting it and create in the creative economy, and really for shedding light on the power that these, I would say, continental networks such as the AU possess, not even just because of the mobilization or the number of youth they could reach, but even in terms of the power they have in the legal capacity and how far they could reach in terms of enhancing that. So I think that really has positioned us to, I would say, a great start to our last segment, which is basically a forward-looking perspective on how the creative economy could be, given that the right policies are exercised in the most convenient manner for the artists, and what that could mean for us. So I think, closing off this one, I'm going to start with Kenneth, and really get to know, what do African creatives need to understand or to thrive in a data-driven, AI-shaped industry, especially that you touched upon how it is more of an opportunity than really a threat, due to the power it possesses and its potential to even put, I would say, art or creativity at the very next level. So, what do you believe that is essential for the African creatives? Over to you, Kenneth.
Thank you, Queen. I think for me, what the African creative needs to just understand is that, from the perspective of storytelling, we need to stay authentic to our culture. I just took a break from filming, and coming back to the sort of community that I grew up in, and filming there and experiencing all the beautiful things that I experienced as a child. It is something that no AI generated content can actually give me. And at the end of the day, years from now, people are going to look at the content and look at the film in itself, and sort of like understand from a cultural perspective how Africa was at a particular time. So I think as creatives, we have AI, but we should think about using AI in terms of helping with maybe researches and all of that. But when it comes to our authenticity, we need to actually stay, true to that. And that for me, if we understand that, we will have a certain level of control over the sort of like Western centric data sets that those AI generated contents are trained on. Over to you, Queen.
Thank you so much, Kenneth, for that, for your powerful answer and reflection. And now, I would like to pose a question to Honorable Mutoni. What's your vision for an AI-powered creative sector? That empowers rather than erases African identity. When you look at a world or at an African continent or an African creative economy where the artists are thriving due to the incorporation of AI in their daily works, what does that look like and what does it mean?
I think it's being touched on by my fellow panelists. We do want to see a creative sector where AI respects the originality of the culture that they come from. It's a sector where AI acknowledges the source of if it's going to quote something or borrow a line from a book, a speech, that again, it's like when we were back in university that we were working on research papers, and you would actually get in trouble for misquoting something or not doing the proper reference when submitting your final thesis, for example. The same way that now most university professors have also their own tools to identify plagiarism, that the AI tools that we'll be using in the future will also be the kind to avoid that type of plagiarism. So we want to have, again, an AI support system, for lack of a better word, that does just that. It supports what's already been created. It makes it easier in terms, again, of production cost, in terms of time. But again, it acknowledges where the original idea is coming from, so that the person who came up with the original idea can be compensated for what they have come up with. Because again, we need to be able to be relevant with the original IP laws that have been signed by all different countries around the world. The other element that I want to come back on is the importance of having multiple languages being recognized into these systems. Of course, now it comes down to how we feed the data set, or how we feed or we train different AI models. There is the example of here in Rwanda, where we do have different programs being supported by the Ministry of ICT and Innovation, where we acknowledge that if we can feed, again, the system with words in our native language, then we actually have a richer pool, of information that we can learn from, again, later in the future. So if we do, again, have all these systems being trained in our native languages, again, we create an environment where the future generation is not pressured to produce in a foreign language. We can revive, again, some of the languages that are starting to become not as common around the continent because people don't use them anymore. I also want to add the importance of having a future generation that now looks at AI tool as something that they can help create, that they can help shape and design, that they're not just using them because they are in a rush to submit something to a producer or to somebody or client, for example. So yes, in a few words, I want to say that this is what we should be working on right now. This is where we need to put more emphasis into having policies that move as fast as the world that we live in terms of the use of AI, and making sure, again, that the legacy that we're leaving behind is one where, again, Africa is not the last one to come to the table, but instead is saying, okay, you know what, we also have our own data set in the national languages that we have in each one of our countries, and that these systems can actually talk to each other and, again, respect the original creators for each one of the different works that
storyboards, and vital set design. So in this case, CNN reports over 60 storyboards and the tools and mechanisms that could help safeguard the creative economy, if in fact such protection is needed. That will lead us to the crucial question: can Africa influence global AI platforms and policy? And finally, we'll wrap up by imagining the future, offering glimpses of what AI might mean for African creativity in the years ahead, as its presence only grows powerful and more undeniable with time. So now, leading up to a start, permit me to invite Mr. Jan Gwet for the opening remarks to set the tone for our conversation. So over to you, Mr. Jan, whenever you're ready.
Yes, I'm ready. Thank you very much, Queen. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, it's a real pleasure to welcome you all to our fourth Youth Connekt Africa X Space. We are incredibly grateful, really, to our distinguished